The orange light of evening spread across the wide Montana sky, turning the open fields into a soft glow of gold and pink. Caleb Rourke sat tall on his old chestnut horse, Dusty, finishing his last round of checking the fences. The day had been long, but peaceful. The kind of day he enjoyed most: slow wind, quiet fields, and the comfort of knowing everything on the ranch was where it should be. Caleb had lived on this ranch his whole life, helping his parents take care of the land and animals since he was strong enough to lift a bucket. He loved the silence of the countryside, the sound of grass moving like water under the breeze, and the way the world felt calm and honest out here. Usually he rode back home at sunset with a clear mind, thinking only about dinner and rest, but that evening felt slightly different. There was a strange stillness in the air, as if the land was holding its breath. As he guided Dusty toward the old east pasture, a small sound drifted through the air. It was soft, thin, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. Caleb paused. Dusty's ears flicked forward, sensing something too. Caleb listened harder. For a moment, there was nothing. Just the wind brushing the tall grass. He shook his head slightly, assuming it must have been an animal. Calves sometimes cried out at dusk, especially if they had wandered too far. Still, something about that sound had not felt like an animal at all. He tapped Dusty gently, and they continued toward the fence line. But then he heard it again, a faint, trembling voice so quiet he almost thought he imagined it. "Please, it hurts." Caleb froze, his breath caught. The words were barely there, like someone trying to speak but too weak to get the sound out. It sent a shiver through him, not from fear, but from the sudden, sharp sense that someone nearby needed help. He turned Dusty in the direction of the voice. His heart started to beat faster, not from panic, but urgency. Caleb had spent his entire life solving problems on the ranch and helping neighbors whenever they needed him. If someone was out here calling for help, especially in such a fragile voice, he knew he couldn't ignore it. "Hello?" Caleb called out, keeping his voice steady and calm. "Can you hear me? Where are you?" No answer. Only the wind. Caleb guided Dusty forward slowly, scanning the ground and the tall grass. The sound had come from somewhere close, but it was difficult to pinpoint. The old east side of the ranch bordered an abandoned property, a place with an empty barn and a few structures that had been left untouched for years. Most folks stayed away from it because the ground was uneven and the buildings were weak. It wasn't dangerous unless someone wandered too close and didn't watch their step. Caleb hoped no one had done exactly that. He dismounted and held Dusty's reins, walking on foot to listen more carefully. Just when he started to wonder if the voice had faded completely, he heard it again, fainter now. "Please." This time it was clearer, full of pain and exhaustion. Caleb's steps quickened. His eyes darted around until he finally spotted something near the edge of the abandoned property line, a bit of light-colored fabric sticking out from under a fallen wooden structure. His stomach tightened. He moved fast but carefully, calling out gently, "I'm coming. You're going to be okay." As he stepped closer, he saw her, a young woman lying half-hidden beneath the collapsed fencing wood. She looked exhausted, her face pale, her hair tangled with dust and grass. Her clothes were slightly torn, not from anything harmful, but from being caught under the heavy wooden pieces. She looked like she had been there for hours, maybe longer. Her eyes were half open, unfocused, and filled with distress. She tried to shift but winced, breathing unevenly. When Caleb crouched beside her, she whispered again, barely audible, "Please. It hurts." Hearing that fragile voice so close made Caleb's chest clench. He paused for a second, not because he didn't know what to do, but because the moment felt unreal. He had never found someone like this before. Alone and in need of help in the middle of nowhere. "It's okay," he said softly, trying to bring comfort into his tone. "I'm here now. You're safe. I'm going to help you get out. I'm going to help you get out. I'm going to help you get out." She blinked slowly, as if trying to stay awake long enough to understand his words. Caleb examined the fallen wooden rails. They looked heavy, but not impossible to move. Still, he had to be careful. The last thing he wanted was to cause her more pain. He glanced back at Dusty and then around the empty field. There was no one else here, no one to call for immediate help, and the nearest ambulance would take too long to reach them. For a moment, Caleb felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. But he didn't let fear take over. He had strong hands, a steady heart, and a lifetime of experience dealing with unexpected problems. He met the girl's eyes gently. "I'm going to lift this wood off you, all right? I'll be careful." She nodded faintly, though her face showed clear discomfort. Caleb took a deep breath, braced his feet, and lifted the wooden structure slowly, carefully, inch by inch, until it was high enough to slide it safely aside. The girl let out a small breath, a sound halfway between relief and exhaustion. "You're doing great," Caleb murmured. "Just breathe." Once the wood was moved, he noticed she was trembling. Not from cold, but from exhaustion and stress. Her arms were scraped lightly, and her legs stiff from being stuck too long, but nothing looked seriously damaged. She just seemed incredibly tired and shaken. "What's your name?" Caleb asked softly. "Emily," she whispered. "All right, Emily," he said gently. "I'm Caleb. I'm going to get you out of here and take care of you. I promise." She closed her eyes, trusting his voice. Caleb removed his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. The evening air had begun to cool, and he didn't want her losing any more strength. As he lifted her gently into his arms, she made a small sound of discomfort, and Caleb paused. "I know," he said in a soft, steady voice. "I'm sorry. I'll be as gentle as I can. We're going to fix this." She leaned lightly against him, too weak to do more. Caleb carried her across the uneven field, making sure not to jostle her. Dusty stood waiting patiently, and Caleb placed Emily carefully onto the saddle in front of him. He held her steady with one arm, while guiding Dusty with the other. As they rode back toward the ranch, Emily rested her head lightly against Caleb's chest. She seemed half asleep, worn out from everything she had gone through. Caleb kept his voice low and calming. "You're almost safe. My mother is a retired nurse. She'll know what to do." Emily didn't answer, but he felt her body relax slightly. As if comforted by the idea of help, the sun dropped lower behind the mountains, painting the sky in soft purple and deep orange. Caleb urged Dusty forward carefully, not wanting to rush too hard and risk jarring Emily. His mind raced with questions. Who was she? How had she ended up alone near the abandoned property? Why had no one come looking for her? But he knew now was not the time to ask. Right now, she needed warmth, rest, and kindness more than anything. When the ranch house finally came into view, warm lights glowing from the windows, Caleb felt a small wave of relief. Margaret, his mother, stepped outside as soon as she heard Dusty approaching. Her eyes widened when she saw Emily. "Oh my goodness, Caleb, what happened?" "I found her out near the old fencing," he answered gently. "She needs rest and care. I think she's been alone out there for a while." Margaret immediately went into calm, skilled action mode. She guided Caleb inside, helping him carry Emily to a warm room with a soft bed. Emily looked overwhelmed by the comfort and safety around her, almost like she couldn't believe it was real. As Margaret examined her carefully, checking breathing, checking skin color, making sure nothing serious was wrong, Emily whispered a quiet, "Thank you." It was so soft that Margaret almost didn't hear it. "You're safe now," Margaret told her kindly. "Rest. We'll take good care of you." Caleb stood near the doorway, watching. Emily seemed so small and tired, yet her presence filled him with a strong sense of responsibility. He didn't know her story yet, but he could tell she had been carrying a heavy burden long before today. And he knew, deep inside, that finding her had not been an accident. It felt as if fate had guided him to that exact moment. As Emily drifted into sleep, Caleb stepped outside the room and leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. The evening had begun like any other, but it had turned into something that would change all their lives. He glanced back at the sleeping girl and whispered to himself, "You're safe now, Emily. Whatever happened, it ends here." The soft light from the bedside lamp filled the room with a gentle warmth. Emily lay resting, her breathing steady but weak. while Margaret moved around quietly with the calm confidence of someone who had cared for many people in her lifetime. Caleb stood nearby, still wearing traces of the worry that had settled in his chest since he found Emily. Dust and bits of dry grass clung to his shirt, but he had hardly noticed. His focus stayed on the girl who had whispered for help in the emptiness of the ranch. Margaret finished checking Emily's pulse and temperature. "She's tired, scared, and dehydrated," she murmured to Caleb. "But I think she'll be all right with rest, warmth, and kindness." Caleb nodded, though his eyebrows stayed pulled together in concern. "She didn't tell me much," he said quietly. "Only her name." "Some people take time before they can talk," Margaret answered softly, placing a light blanket over Emily's shoulders. "Right now, she just needs to know she's safe." Emily curled slightly into the blanket, as if trying to protect whatever little comfort she had found. Margaret turned off the brighter light and left only a soft glow beside the bed. Caleb stepped back, letting the silence settle. He wasn't sure what to think or feel. He barely knew this girl. Yet something about the way she whispered those words, "Please, it hurts," stayed with him, echoing in his mind like a quiet reminder of the moment he had discovered her. He followed his mother into the kitchen, where the smell of hot tea floated through the warm air. Margaret set a kettle on the stove and motioned for him to sit. "I think she's been alone for quite some time," Margaret said, speaking softly as she filled 2 mugs. "Her clothes are dusty, her hands are rough from overworking, and she seems afraid, even in her sleep." Caleb felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice gentle. "She seemed fragile, like she didn't know what to expect." Margaret nodded. When a person has felt alone or ignored for a long time, even kindness can feel unfamiliar. She handed Caleb a steaming cup of tea. "We'll just be patient. That's all she needs from us." An hour later, Margaret checked on Emily again. Caleb stayed in the kitchen, staring out the window at the quiet, dark sky. The stars were bright tonight, scattered across the vast sky like silver dust. But Caleb's thoughts were far from peaceful. He kept thinking of how empty the abandoned property had looked, how strange it was for someone to be out there alone without anyone searching for her. When Margaret returned, she smiled gently. "She woke up for a moment," she said softly. "I gave her a little water and some warm broth. Only a few sips, but she kept it down." "Did she say anything?" Caleb asked. "Only that she was tired," Margaret replied. "She thanked me again. Very politely. She seems like a good-hearted girl." Caleb nodded slowly. "Do you think she was lost?" Margaret hesitated. It wasn't like her to jump to conclusions. "I think," she said carefully, "that she has been carrying a heavy burden for a while. And sometimes, when a person carries too much, they end up somewhere they never intended to be." Caleb didn't press for more. He respected his mother's judgment. Later that night, when the ranch finally grew quiet and Dusty had been fed and put away, Caleb stood outside Emily's room once more. The door was cracked open, just an inch. Inside, Emily slept peacefully, her breathing soft and steady. A small piece of hair fell across her cheek, and she looked younger than he expected, young, tired, and in need of kindness. Caleb watched her for a moment, making sure she was comfortable, then quietly pulled the door shut and went to bed. Morning arrived slowly, with pale sunshine creeping over the horizon and filling the ranch with warmth. Birds chirped outside, and the faint smell of breakfast drifted through the house. Caleb had been up since dawn, feeding the animals, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Emily. When he entered the kitchen, Margaret whispered, "She's awake." Caleb straightened. "How is she?" Margaret smiled softly. "Nervous. Confused. But better than yesterday." She asked where she was, and I explained. She was grateful. Caleb nodded. "Can I see her?" "Of course," Margaret said. "Just be gentle. She's still unsure." Caleb stepped toward Emily's room and knocked lightly before opening the door. Inside, Emily was sitting up slowly, propped against pillows. Her hair had been brushed by Margaret, and she looked cleaner and more comfortable than the night before. Still pale, still tired, but safer. Her eyes met Caleb's, and she seemed to freeze for a moment before relaxing slightly. "Good morning," Caleb said softly. "How are you feeling?" Emily swallowed before speaking. "Better, I think. Thank you." Her voice was fragile, as if each word was chosen carefully. Caleb smiled gently. "You gave us quite a scare yesterday." She lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry." "There's nothing to be sorry for," he said. "I'm just glad I found you." Emily nodded, though her expression showed she didn't quite believe she deserved such kindness. Caleb stepped a little closer and spoke with calm certainty. "You don't have to talk about anything that makes you uncomfortable," he said softly. "I only want you to rest and feel safe here." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, she looked like someone who had not heard those words in a long time. Caleb pulled a wooden chair next to the bed. "Do you remember how you ended up near that old fence?" Emily hesitated, her hands twisting the blanket nervously. I'm not sure how to explain." She looked down. "I was staying with some relatives, but things were difficult." Caleb didn't interrupt. He waited, letting her speak at her own pace. "They didn't mean to be unkind," she continued slowly. "I think they just didn't know how to take care of someone who needed help. I tried to do chores, but I wasn't very strong. I think I got tired and fell near the fence, and I couldn't get up after that." Caleb felt a gentle ache in his chest, not from anger, but sadness. "You must have been scared," he said softly. Emily nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "I called out for hours. I didn't think anyone was coming." Caleb leaned forward slightly. "But someone did," he reminded her. "You're not alone anymore." She looked at him then, really looked, and her eyes filled with gratitude so deep that it made Caleb swallow hard. Margaret entered a moment later with a warm bowl of oatmeal and a kind smile. "Breakfast time," she said cheerfully. "You need strength." Emily accepted the bowl with shaky hands, and Margaret sat beside her, helping her eat slowly. Caleb watched quietly, not wanting to overwhelm her. There was something gentle and humble about Emily's presence, as if she had spent so long trying not to be a burden that she forgot she deserved care. When the bowl was empty, Emily looked from Margaret to Caleb. "Thank you," she whispered. "Both of you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me." Margaret brushed her hand lightly. "Well, dear, the world has a way of bringing the right people together at the right time." Emily smiled faintly, the first true smile they had seen from her. The next few hours passed peacefully. Margaret gave Emily warm herbal tea and helped her bathe while Caleb handled the morning ranch work. But he kept checking the house windows, wondering how she was doing. By lunchtime, Emily had enough strength to sit at the kitchen table. She moved slowly, but determinedly, showing a quiet strength that surprised Caleb. Margaret served soup, and Emily ate gratefully. "This is the first homemade meal I've had in a long time," she said softly. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need," Margaret replied warmly. "We're not in a hurry." Emily blinked quickly, touched by the offer. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," Margaret said simply. Caleb nodded. "You're safe here. That's all that matters." For a moment, the room felt warm in a deeply comforting way, like a place where people healed, not because of medicine, but because of kindness. Emily looked around the cozy kitchen, then back at the two strangers who had shown her more care in 24 hours than she had felt in months. Her eyes filled with emotion. "I didn't think anyone would ever help me," she whispered. Caleb smiled softly. "Well, we're here, and we're not going anywhere." As the afternoon sun drifted through the windows, something in Emily's posture shifted. She sat a little straighter. Her voice grew steadier. She began to trust, not completely, but enough to start believing that she had finally found a safe place. Caleb watched her quietly, thinking about how small she had looked when he first found her. Now, even with tired eyes and trembling hands, she looked a little stronger, a little braver, a little more herself, and he couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of her healing, of her story, and maybe even of something bigger than any of them understood yet. The morning sunlight filled the small hospital room with a soft glow. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her hands resting nervously on her lap. She had slept for many hours, and though her body still felt weak, her mind felt clearer than it had in a long time. The warmth from the window made her feel a little safer, like the world outside wasn't as frightening as it had once seemed. She kept thinking about the previous evening, the soft voices of Margaret and Caleb, the warm food, the gentle care, the way someone finally listened to her. It had been such a long time since she felt seen. Now she was in a real hospital bed, surrounded by kind nurses and soft blankets, with people who seemed genuinely worried about her. When the door opened, Caleb stepped inside. His footsteps were steady, and his expression softened when he saw that she was awake. "How are you feeling today?" he asked, pulling a chair beside the bed. Emily offered a small, shy smile. "Better. Much better. Thank you for bringing me here." "You don't have to thank me," Caleb said. "I just did what anyone should do." Emily lowered her eyes. Not everyone would have. Caleb wanted to argue, but he could see the truth in her expression. She had probably spent a long time feeling unseen and unheard, and her soft words carried the weight of that experience. For a moment, silence filled the room, not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. Then, a gentle knock came on the door. A woman with a friendly face and a notebook stepped inside. "Hi, Emily. I'm Clara," she said warmly. "I'm a social worker here. Is it okay if I talk to you for a little while?" Emily's shoulders stiffened, and she looked uncertain. Caleb noticed her reaction and spoke softly. "You don't have to talk about anything you don't want to," he reminded her. Clara nodded, sensing the fear. "We just want to understand what happened, so we can help you. No one is going to force you into anything." Emily took a slow breath and nodded slightly. "Okay, I'll try." Clara pulled up a chair and sat across from her, keeping her voice gentle. "First, I want to make sure you're comfortable. Do you need anything? Water? A blanket?" Emily shook her head. "I'm fine." "All right," Clara said. "Can you tell me how you ended up alone near that old property? Anything you remember will help us understand." Emily swallowed. Her fingers tightened around the blanket. She didn't want to speak badly about anyone, especially family, but she also knew she needed help. Keeping everything inside had only made life harder, so she took a deep breath and started. "I left home a few months ago," she said quietly. "Things were hard there. Not dangerous, just emotionally heavy. I felt like I didn't belong, like I was always in the way." Clara nodded gently. "That must have been difficult." Emily's eyes lowered. "I decided to live for a while with some distant relatives. They said I could stay if I helped with daily chores. At first, it was fine. But after some weeks, they became impatient. I wasn't very good at some of the tasks. I tried my best, but," she hesitated, choosing her words with care. "They told me I needed to toughen up. That I was too slow, too sensitive. They weren't cruel, just distant. If I got tired, they said I was being dramatic. If I felt unwell, they said I just needed to work harder." Caleb felt something inside him tighten, but he kept quiet, giving her space to speak. "One morning," Emily continued softly, "I went outside to help with some chores near their old property line. I think I got lightheaded from not eating much. I stepped wrong and slipped near the fence. I remember falling, and then everything went blurry." Clara listened intently. "Did they know what happened?" Emily looked down at her hands. "I'm not sure. I called out for them for a while. Maybe they didn't hear me. Or maybe they thought I was making a fuss again. I don't know." Her voice trembled. "I didn't want to believe they ignored me. I kept hoping someone would come, and no one did," Caleb said softly, sadness in his voice. Emily shook her head. "I just lay there for hours. Maybe longer. The sun kept moving. The lights down, maybe lay there 40 spend. The sun kept moving, and I kept getting more tired. I tried to sit up but couldn't. My voice got weaker. I thought, maybe no one would ever find me. Caleb leaned forward. But I did, he said gently. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Yes, you did. Clara waited before speaking again. Emily, thank you for sharing this. You were very brave. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes people don't understand when someone needs a little extra kindness. That doesn't mean your feelings weren't real. Emily nodded slowly. Her eyes glistened with emotion. Hearing someone say that her feelings were valid brought a strange warmth to her chest, one she hadn't felt in years. Clara continued. We're going to help you. You won't be sent back to a place where you feel unsafe or unwelcome. We have programs and temporary housing where you can heal, find support, and figure out your next steps. Emily looked surprised. Really? I can stay somewhere safe? Yes, Clara assured her. And you won't be alone. Emily wiped her eyes, her hands trembling slightly from relief. Caleb watched her carefully. He had seen people in pain before, animals, neighbors, even himself at times, but the quiet sadness in Emily felt different. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was hidden, gentle, and deep. The kind that lived inside a person for a long time. Clara stood up. I'll let you rest now. But know that you're not in trouble. You're not to blame. And you deserve to feel safe. Once she left, Emily sat silently, taking slow breaths. Caleb stayed beside her. Are you okay? He asked softly. Emily nodded. I think I will be. Caleb smiled warmly. Good, that's all that matters. She looked at him carefully, as if trying to understand why someone she barely knew cared so much. Why are you being so kind? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb leaned back in the chair. My mother taught me that kindness isn't something you choose only when it's easy. You give it because someone needs it. And you never know how much it might mean to them. Emily blinked back fresh tears. It means more than you think. Caleb's expression softened. Then I'm glad. Over the next few days, Emily stayed in the hospital while the doctors made sure she had no hidden injuries, and her strength returned. Caleb and Margaret visited her every day. Margaret brought her warm meals and soft blankets. Caleb brought books and fresh flowers from the ranch. Emily slowly grew stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. She started talking more, laughing softly at small jokes, and trusting the space around her. One afternoon, Clara returned with a folder of information. Emily, she said warmly, we found a safe temporary housing program for you. It's a comfortable place with friendly staff. You'll have your own room, good food, and support to plan your future. Emily looked nervous but hopeful. Will I be able to see Caleb and Margaret? Clara smiled. Absolutely. You're free to maintain any friendships you choose. A gentle calm filled Emily's heart. Later that day, when Caleb visited, Emily told him the news. I'm leaving the hospital tomorrow, she said softly. They found a safe place for me. Caleb smiled warmly. That's great. You deserve a fresh start. Emily looked at him for a long moment. Thank you. For everything. I know I've said it so many times, but I truly mean it. You don't have to thank me, Caleb replied. I'm just glad you're getting the help you need. Emily hesitated before asking, Can I still come to the ranch sometimes? Maybe help out with small things when I get stronger? Caleb's smile widened, warm, honest, and genuine. You're welcome anytime. The ranch will always have a place for you. Emily felt something inside her settle, like a quiet promise that she was no longer wandering through life alone. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Emily looked out the hospital window at the peaceful sky. For the first time, in a long time, the world felt gentle. Not perfect, not easy, but kinder than it had been before. She thought of Caleb finding her in the field, of Margaret's soft hands caring for her, of Clara's reassuring words. She thought of the warm meals, the safe room, the conversations that didn't hurt, and the simple kindness she had been given. It wasn't just her body that was healing. It was her heart, and she knew deep down that this was the moment her life finally began to move away from fear and into hope. The morning sun poured through the windows, filling Emily's new room with a soft, golden light. It was quiet, except for the distant hum of activity in the housing program where she now stayed. The place was peaceful and safe, a far cry from the lonely field where Caleb had found her only days before. For the first time in a long while, Emily could breathe without worry. She had unpacked a few small belongings, a journal, a book Caleb had brought her from the ranch, and a framed photo of the open fields she now remembered with a strange mix of fear and hope. She sat on the edge of her bed, her hands resting on the journal. Writing had become a way for her to process everything: her fear, her relief, and her slowly growing sense of hope. A gentle knock came at the door. "Emily?" Caleb's voice floated in. "Do you want some company?" Emily smiled softly. "Yes. Please." Caleb stepped inside, carrying a small basket of flowers and a warm smile. His presence was calm and steady, like the ranch itself. He placed the basket on the small table near her bed. "I thought you might like something pretty for your room," he said. "Flowers always make a place feel warmer." Emily leaned forward and touched one of the soft petals. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's beautiful." Caleb sat down beside her, careful not to crowd her space. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," she said honestly. "I feel safe, and I think I'm ready to start learning how to take care of myself again." Caleb nodded. "That's the most important part. You've already come so far. You should be proud of yourself." Emily smiled, a little shyly. "I am, and I'm grateful for everything you and your mother did for me." Caleb shook his head gently. "We just did what anyone would do, but I'm glad it helped." They sat together quietly for a few moments, listening to the soft sounds of the building. Emily's thoughts drifted to the ranch, to the open fields, the wind in the grass, and the sound of Dusty's hooves on the dirt. She realized she missed it: the sense of space, the calm, and even the simple routines that Caleb had introduced her to in those first days after finding her. I was thinking," Emily began carefully, "maybe once I'm stronger, I could come visit the ranch again. Help with small things. Maybe. I'd like that." Caleb's eyes brightened. "You're welcome anytime. The ranch has plenty of work, and we could use someone like you." Emily felt a warmth in her chest. For so long, she had felt invisible and alone. But now, she had a place to belong, people who cared, and the freedom to heal at her own pace. The following weeks were filled with small but meaningful steps toward recovery. Emily learned to cook simple meals, make her bed, and manage her daily routines. The staff at the housing program were patient and kind, offering guidance without rushing her. For the first time, she experienced the sense of independence she had longed for, along with the security of knowing that help was always nearby if she needed it. During her free afternoons, Caleb would visit. Sometimes they would sit quietly in the sun, talking about simple things: the weather, the animals on the ranch, or stories from his childhood. Emily cherished these moments. They were peaceful, predictable, and safe, allowing her to slowly rebuild the trust that had been broken over so many months. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Caleb brought a small wooden box. "I thought you might like to try something new," he said, opening it to reveal a set of gardening tools and seeds. "You can plant flowers, herbs, whatever you like. And if you want, when you come to the ranch, you can learn to grow things outside too." Emily's eyes lit up. "Really? I'd love that." Caleb smiled warmly. "It'll be fun. And you'll see, caring for plants can help you care for yourself too." For the first time, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't constantly afraid. A future where she could nurture, create, and grow, instead of hiding and worrying. The idea felt strange but exciting. Gradually, Emily's visits to the ranch became more frequent. She started with small tasks: collecting eggs, feeding animals, and helping Caleb with light chores. Each task gave her a sense of purpose. She felt her confidence growing, not with grand gestures, but in the quiet satisfaction of completing simple responsibilities. Caleb watched her closely, always offering guidance, but never pressure. "Take your time," he would say. "There's no rush. You're learning at your own pace." Emily appreciated the gentle approach. No one had ever allowed her to move at her own pace before. Even her relatives had expected too much too soon, leaving her feeling incapable and small. Here, she felt capable. Here, she felt seen. One evening, after a long day of helping around the ranch, Emily and Caleb sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky was painted in brilliant oranges and purples, the kind of view that made the world feel vast and beautiful. "I never thought I'd see something so beautiful and feel safe at the same time," Emily said quietly. Caleb looked at her, his expression gentle. "Sometimes, it takes losing your way to truly appreciate the places where you belong." Emily smiled. A soft, genuine smile that seemed to reach her eyes. For the first time in months, she didn't feel invisible. She felt present, alive, and ready to move forward. Over the next few months, Emily's healing continued. She grew stronger physically and more confident emotionally. She started keeping a daily journal, writing about her thoughts, experiences, and the little joys of each day. Writing became a way to understand herself, to capture the progress she was making, and to remind herself that she was no longer alone. She also began to form bonds with other residents at the housing program. They shared stories, helped each other, and celebrated small victories together. Emily realized that connection was a vital part of healing. It wasn't just about safety or food or shelter, it was about people who truly cared. Caleb remained a steady presence in her life, and sometimes, just his presence alone was comforting. Emily started to see that support could be gentle, quiet, and consistent. It didn't need to be loud or dramatic. Just someone who was there, day after day, believing in her and encouraging her to believe in herself. One day, Emily received a letter from a distant relative she had stayed with before. It was short and formal, apologizing for not understanding her needs and offering kind words for her future. Emily read it carefully, felt a sense of closure, and then folded it gently. She realized that she didn't need to carry the weight of the past anymore. She had people who cared, a safe place, and the skills to move forward. As spring approached, Emily finally felt ready for a longer visit to the ranch. She packed a small bag, her heart fluttering with anticipation and a touch of nervousness. When she arrived, Caleb greeted her with a warm smile, Dusty nuzzling her hand affectionately. The familiar smell of hay, grass, and earth brought back memories. But this time, they were comforting instead of frightening. The ranch felt alive with possibility. Emily spent the day learning more about the land, how to plant seeds, care for animals, and maintain the fences. Each task, though small, gave her a sense of accomplishment. The physical work was tiring, but in a good way. For the first time, Emily felt her body and mind working together, and she liked the feeling. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily spoke quietly. "I feel different, lighter, somehow." Caleb nodded. "That's what happens when you find the right people and the right place. You start to heal, piece by piece." Emily smiled. A deep, contented smile. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this way. But now, I do." Weeks turned into months, and Emily continued to grow. She stayed in touch with the housing program, attended workshops, and learned skills that helped her gain independence. Caleb and Margaret became like family to her, not because of blood, but because of love, trust, and kindness. Emily realized that healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about learning to live despite it, to create moments of joy, and to embrace people who cared. And she had learned that hope wasn't a fragile thing, it could be nurtured, grown, and protected. just like the plants she was learning to care for at the ranch. One evening, Emily walked through the fields with Caleb, the sky painted in soft pastels. She paused, looking around at the open land, the animals grazing peacefully, and the gentle sway of the grass in the wind. "I'm glad I met you," she said softly. "And I'm glad I found this place. You saved me, in more ways than one." Caleb shook his head gently. "You saved yourself too, Emily. I just helped you see it." She smiled, feeling a sense of completion and peace. The fear, the uncertainty, and the loneliness of the past months had begun to fade. In their place was a quiet strength, a growing confidence, and a newfound joy in life. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the ranch. Emily took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the fresh, open air. She felt alive, free, and ready to embrace the life ahead. For the first time in a long time, Emily was truly home.